adults believe there's a mental health crisis in the U.S. That's according to a recent poll. And on World Mental Health Day, experts say it's time to erase stigma and raise awareness of these issues. Mandy Gaither has tips on how to deal with some of the most common mental health concerns.
A crisis in the U.S. Many Americans may not be getting the mental health help they need. 80% of those who took part in a recent poll say the cost of mental health care is a big problem. About 3/4 say that insurers not covering mental health the way they do physical health is a significant concern. And 63% are concerned about the lack of providers taking insurance.
People, I think, are really beginning to identify that mental health is just as important to address as physical health.
Anxiety is the most commonly reported mental health issue. Psychologist Kia Ray Pruitt with Cleveland Clinic says if you're feeling anxious, first identify what's behind it.
Is it fear about something? Is it worry? Is it based off of something bad that has happened? So I think what's important is to kind of understand what's causing the anxiety.
Then Pruitt says to take a break, think about ways you can adjust your life.
Maybe you're overcommitting yourself. Maybe you're worried about something that may never happen.
When it comes to depression, another common mental health concern, Pruitt says to be aware of the signs, which may include feeling sad or anxious often, not wanting to take part in activities you once thought were fun, feeling irritable, having trouble sleeping, and changes in appetite. If you're feeling these symptoms, talk to someone.
You don't have to be alone in the struggles.
This summer, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline switched to a 3-digit number, and early data suggests success, with calls jumping 45% in the first month compared with the same time a year before. Meanwhile, here at home, the Fargo Park District says they're proud to play a small part in strides toward bettering mental health. They want to remind you of the resources available, including 150 parks and facilities, Courts Plus programs and amenities for all ages, programs and leagues and community events and spaces to make new friends and explore the area around you. Well, typically eating utensils are washed, right, or thrown away. But next up, see why some people are eating them.